series of events. And so it's my prayer and hope that our program this evening will have a positive recency effect as you get back to your families and to your work in New York. I also want to introduce Michelle Coe. We have been hosting groups similar to this, mostly collegiate groups, for the last 25 years or so. And without Michelle Coe, it would be an unmitigated disaster in terms of schedule, in terms of venues, in terms of hospitality and housing and information. And so she works doggedly to make sure that when folks come to experience the rich history of justice work, especially faith-based justice work here in Central Alabama, that they have a wonderful experience. So I want to thank her again for all this. The way we've typically done these dinners is we will eat first and have some fellowship, and then we will introduce our panelists. And tonight we have two groups for you, and I'm delighted that they're both here because over the last 20 or so years they have been tirelessly generous in sharing their stories with the collegiate people, with other faith-based organizations and social justice advocacy groups that have come to Montgomery now, especially in these last 5 or 6 years, to enjoy the rich programming that EJI and SPLC and Southern Poverty Law Center and Rosa Parks and these first-class museums and sites have made available to the world. And so I'm going to ask Rabbi Manuel to bless us and our food and our fellowship. And then I'll figure out how we get to decide who goes first.
Thank you. We have a tradition of saying something called the Motzi.
First
blessing
panel
is over bread.
I call them my sheroes and my heroes because I think we are so blessed to have these living links to Rosa Parks, these living links to Martin Luther King, these living links to Coretta and Juanita Abernathy. And so I want to invite Jeannie Graetz, who is the life partner of the Reverend Roberta Graetz. They are Lutheran pastors who are originally from Ohio and West Virginia and Pennsylvania, who came south in the 50s to answer a call to pastor a predominantly African-American Lutheran congregation here in Montgomery, and had the temerity to be the first and only white ministerial couple to support Dr. King and the bus movement. And so Robert is in ill health, but he and Jeannie have spent the last 69 years supporting and loving each other, and the last 59 or 60 of those years working directly for justice. So Jeannie Graetz, harassment, threats against both you and Bob and your young children. Can you share with the group the incident of the major bombing that took place that night across the city? How it almost affected your family?
Well, you know that the bus boycott lasted 382 days, and after it was over, the Ku Klux Klan that hated us so badly and tried to intimidate us in many ways, including bombings, they could not stand it, that the bus boycott was over and we won. And so there were 7 men from Selma who had this big deal on the 10th of January after the bus boycott was over in December. And there were 7 of them, and they had 7 bombs to throw. Well, the first one they threw was at our house. At that time, we only had 4 children. The newest baby was 9 days old. 2 o'clock in the morning, we got a bomb thrown in our house. It actually was the second bomb, because the first one that they threw up onto our driveway that sloped up toward the house contained 11 sticks of dynamite, a container of TNT, and 2 lit fuses. And there was no reason that didn't go off and kill us all, because that was the plan. But the Lord kept that from happening. They came back and threw a smaller bomb to make that, to detonate the other one. And it landed up right by the house. And the force of it went above the other bomb, and it did not go off. The smaller bombs did a bunch of damage to the house, and nobody was injured. But I had a hard time forgiving them because of trying to kill our babies. And this was one of the things that I thought they would not do.
Finally, can you share that struggle for forgiveness? The people who were indicted and tried for the assault were all exonerated. They were all, kind of like you had said, they didn't see anything. So you knew, and most of the rest of the city knew who the perpetrators were.
Oh yeah, they were in the newspaper. We knew their names. We saw their faces in there. They had admitted that they did it. They had all kinds of evidence about it. But the way Southern justice was in those days, these 12 white jurors, men jurors, just didn't exonerated him. And it's the kind of thing that happened to black people all the time. And that, and the fact that we knew the guy who threw the big bomb to kill us. And he started a bail bonds place right next to First Baptist Church, which was one of the places that got bombed. He started this bail bonds place. He put his name on the sign in front of him. And for many years, before we moved back here in 2005. We brought groups like yours on pilgrimage down here, and every time we went by there, I took back the forgiveness that I had tried to give that man for what he did. And I had wanted to be able to forgive him, but then every time I went by there and everybody could see his name, he was flaunting his name because he had gotten away with a lot of KKK things. And here he was, everybody knew that he had done it, and he was just displaying his name, and he got away with it. And I finally had to ask the Lord to take that unforgiveness away, because unforgiveness was my problem. With not being able to forgive him just hurt me. He didn't know I was, I'm sure he didn't even know who I was. And I let him make me feel bad. So I finally, it was one day, I'll never forget, he came by, and I said, here we go again. Lord, you got to take this away from me, because this is terrible. I'm doing something terrible to myself. And the Lord gave me an answer that I never I still get tears if I think about it. He gave me laughter. I was laughing at myself, but he just took away that unforgiveness. And when I would go by that place after that, I would laugh, I would make a sign of the cross and pray for him. And it's been gone, and I'm just so thankful for being able to really forgive. Because I'm the one that is being hurt by it.
As a young woman, Doris was a protege of Rosa Parks and worked you have a biography on your program, but was very much inspired to her 60 years of working for justice as a young woman under the tutelage and the mentorship of Mrs. Parks.
Really emphasizing the right to vote. So at this time, my sister and I and the other young people went around door to door asking people if they would register to vote. So, and then we raised a little money down at the basement of the Elks Club, Georgia, 25 cents on a Wednesday night. But she was so dedicated and passionate about the right to vote. She was able to register to vote, but Mr. Parks was not. So she put a lot of emphasis on that, and the other thing was, we knew about her coming from Abbeville, and that Reese Taylor was gang raped, and she made that a national issue. So we heard about that. But in our time around where we were, there was a young man named Jeremiah Reed. And we talked about Jeremiah Reed and his rights. And we talked about how if we would register to vote, then we would be able to put people in place so that we get justice for Jeremiah Reed. Now, Father, you know, tell them about Jeremiah Reed and keep going. Nowhere. Jeremiah Reed was a young high school student who delivered groceries to the white neighborhood over in Cloverdale, you know. And so he frequently went to this lady's house. So everybody want to know why is this boy delivering so many groceries so often. So they caught him, and she hollered rape, and so he was executed. And that grew. The other thing was, a lot of women were arrested prior to this. I think in Joanne Robinson's book she talked about 400 women, because this thing had risen up over a period of 20 years. So a lady named Mary Roberta had started this, and she was meeting with the city barber. But we kind of knew about it because one of my cousins was one of the ones arrested. So around the table, we heard the stories, and we were connected to each other at that time. Mrs. Parks, my grandmother, brother, was one of the sleeping corporals, and he rode with E.D. Nixon. And I think that's how Mrs. Parks got to know us. We were often down at E.D. Nixon's house, and would stop by Mr. Malden's wife's house, who lived with her sister. So we were all connected. Everybody knew everything and all the families, and we talked about this thing called registering to vote. At that time, we didn't know when we would have a chance to go down to register because they didn't let the black folk know. So the way we knew was that the people that worked in the building would tell us, say, the books are open next week. And so we knew to take people down there to register to vote. But I was really impressed with Mrs. Parks' determination for the freedom of our people. And the other thing that impressed me was her love for her family. That was really, that shook something in me. Raymond, She always told you about Raymond. And then we had conversations with her mother that lived there with her. But anybody would tell you that during that time, they were involved and they were in the NAACP. Well, if you go to that little apartment, you know that if we had 12 people in the meeting, it was overflow problem. People were really afraid. You had to be brave to do this thing. And then they took the names of people that went in and out these meetings in these houses. But it didn't faze her. She was steady determined. And Mr. Parks was really afraid, but it wasn't about that. It was that he was involved with the Scarborough boys. I don't know if y'all know the history of the Scarborough boys. And they used to chase him. He had to sneak home at night. But Mrs. Parks, despite all of this, and despite all that going on with her family in Abbeville, so when they say Mrs. Parks was tired, her feet were hurting or something, no, Mrs. Parks was tired about the treatment of our people. And so she said, no.
Doris has just come back from having received a national award from the Reverend Samuel Proctor Preaching Institute that's held. It is the national gathering of African American and other preachers who want to advance that art and that craft. And so she was among 4 other women. Dr. Janetta Cole was the first female president of Spelman College in Atlanta. So she was in high cotton this week. And we're proud of her and glad that they honored Doris. Deacon Nathan Williams drove during the bus movement. Biggest claim to fame is he's my father. And currently serves as a polling official for this precinct on the zoning commission for our city, and is the chair of the deacon ministry at his family church, the Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church here in Montgomery.
Being born and reared here in Montgomery, I can recall to y'all that I can remember a time there was no rights, period, no rights. And referring to that, we didn't have any, and we have all been downtown. Downtown we have, most of y'all been in New Orleans, and Little Louisiana, I say that. We have a street downtown, Monroe Street. That was the black folks' street in Montgomery. That was on the backside of town. We really was not able, not allowed to walk down Dexter Avenue in peace. Every time that we had policemen always would harass you by going down Dexter Avenue. That being a black person, you go down with your head up looking, they would come ask you, what you doing looking at that white woman? All this type of stuff they would do. And in most of the stores downtown, we had to go in the back door with SL Green cases, Cresses, and some old stores. And the lunch counters were back there. And I always noticed one thing, but they had fountains. They had one neighbor, colored water and white water. So I asked my parents, I never seen any colored water. All the water looked the same to me. But that's what we had to drink out of the napkin. So that was the time. And I into moving forward, not too, a little more than that, but I moved forward. And to the bus boycott time. You know, as Crenshaw mentioned about the voting rights. We see we had another man, I don't think you hear too much about him. His name was Rufus Lewis. He was a businessman here in Montgomery, ran a film home here in Montgomery. He really pushed us to vote, to go register to vote. Not to vote because we couldn't vote, just to register to vote. And he had his station working. He would come by all neighborhood, all over Montgomery, and take a vote down every day. But during that process, it didn't matter how many or how much education you had, degrees or anything you had on that particular day, it was only going to approve so many votes. If we get to that day, that's all we're going to pass. I mean, it went down there. That way, all meant the way putting a question to you, like beans in a jar. I mean, in the jar, this type of thing. So we were just harassed, period. Just harassed. And we just used the word we called hell. See, and I'll tell you one other thing now that about being right here again, as I said, Montgomery, I can tell you Montgomery now is a much, much better place than it was when I was a young man, a young boy coming up in Montgomery. So I'm not happy with Montgomery, but I see a great difference in Montgomery. See,
Nelson Malden, entrepreneur, businessman, raconteur. When I had hair, growing up in Montgomery, Nelson and his two brothers took care of it for me. But Nelson has continued to be active from his collegiate days and his early encounters with Martin Luther King in efforts here and nationally to advance the cause of social justice. And Nelson shares some, as you will hear, some really unique stories of MLK that most biographers and historians have not captured yet. But due to a collaboration between he and Michelle Coe, his barbershop, which was directly down the street from Dr. King's residence, directly down the street from Alabama State University, and not too far from Dexter Church, Nelson had a wonderful collection of items throughout the walls of barbershop. Original photographs and newspaper clippings and mementos from the movement and all of the struggles after the bus movement. And Michelle Coe was visiting her family at the Smithsonian in African American History Museum in DC and felt like something was missing when it came to the Montgomery store. And so she wrote one of the curators of that section and told them about Nelson. They called Mr. Malden, interviewed him, and he has consigned all of his first materials to the Smithsonian.
I was the youngest barber at this barber shop. I also was a student at Alabama State College. I never liked to cut another head after 20 minutes an hour. I had a 10 o'clock class that morning, and exactly 9:30, this blue Pontiac pulled up in front of the shop. And this young man got out, and I looked at his head like any barber would do. His hair was very short. And I said to myself, oh heck, I can knock him out in 15 minutes. He came in the shop, asked him like any new customer, what's your name? He said, Martin Luther King. I said, where you from? Atlanta, Georgia. He said, what are you doing here? He said, I'm here to preach my crowd sermon today. I said, good to meet you. So after I finished cutting his hair, like any new customer, I gave him the mirror to say, like this hair, he told me pretty good. So you know, you tell a barber pretty good, that's an insult. He came back 2 weeks later, I was busy, the other barber was vacant, but he waited on me. So I remember that sarcastic statement. I said, that must have been a pretty good haircut. He said, you're all right. I said, oh, this kid, it's going to be hard to handle. You know, I thought I was hot stuff at that time anyway. So after I cut his hair 7, 8 times, you know, like any other, by me being a student, young man, and most of the customers at least give you 25 or 50% tip. So I noticed he would never give me a tip. So I decided I'd use a little psychologist. I said, Rev, I said, when you finish preaching a sermon on Sunday, the Sunday members tell you what a good sermon, and doesn't it make you feel good? He said, yes. I said, when you go to a restaurant and you have a nice meal and the waitress give you good service and you give her a tip, I said, don't you think that make her feel good? He said, yes. He said, do you read your Bible? I said, yes. He grabbed my hand and held a real tight. He said, my Bible tells me you're supposed to put 10% of your earnings in church. Do you put 10% of your earnings in church? I said, Reb, I'm a student at Alabama State College. I cannot afford to put 10% of my earnings in church. He said, I'm the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, and I can't afford to tip you. So anyway, Brother King came here after Vernon John. Vernon John was the first black preacher in the United States to have a sermon published in a national publication in 1926. And he always said, black people, said the white man ought to keep you down. He said, you pay him your money to ride to town and lower your dignity. Said that you work in the field all day plowing the mule from sunrise to sunset for nothing. Now you can't afford to walk. He said, walk. He said, it's better for you anyway. So Reverend King came to town and said, you stop going to these white restaurants for food. So you have enough food establishment in our community to take care of our needs. So Reverend King came, but some kind of way he picked up that same sign and said we should stop going around the back to over the white restaurant and say, you dignify yourself. If you look all your dignity, said, don't do that. So one Friday evening when we got through at the barber shop, my boss man said, hey Nelson, so let's go to Fairview and get some of that fried chicken. I said, that sounds like a wonder. So we goes over on Fairview, you go to the side door, you knock on the door, the waiters come and take your order, you pay for it, and you stand on the sidewalk until she get it ready. So that particular Friday evening, we were standing on the sidewalk, and I looked up the street, and I said, hey, Warren, I said, that look like Reverend King car coming. He said, sure is. So I ran and jumped in the car. I said, come on. And by the time he ready to turn to get ready to come toward the car, lady said, your chicken is ready. He had to make up his mind in a split second whether he gonna be embarrassed or whether he gonna back and get the chicken. So he went back and got the chicken. By the time Reverend King was right in front of the stop sign on the corner. And he bowed to Reverend King bowed to him. So I said to myself, I sure hope Reverend King will come back in that barber shop and say anything before the customers what he saw us do. So sure enough, the next Saturday night, we had 10 customers on the bench and 3 in the chair, 4 standing. I said, doggone, I said, there he come. He came in the shop, I kind of frowned up and he walked through the front door. And after he didn't say anything about what he saw us do. And so after he got in the chair, when I put the cloth around him, he said, how was the chicken? I said, how you know that was chicken? He said, some of my members gave me some one time, the show was good. I said, you better stop eating no white food, for nothing to make you sick. He said, I see you pretty healthy. So anyway, one of the best debates we ever had in the barber shop was a sociology professor from Hampton Institute. So helped me to have met up in the barber. I knew the sociology professor because he had been in the barber shop before. So Reverend King was a world-renowned figure at that time, so I was kind of very intelligent that day how I was going to introduce them to each other. So it came to my mind so about Reverend King being world-renowned. I said, Reverend King, this is Dr. Hathaway from Hampton Institute. He's also in the same field that you did when you got, see, Reverend King got his undergraduate degree from Morehouse in sociology. So they started talking, and so it wasn't no big thing, they were standing up. And so Reverend King said something when the conversation started. He said the moral force in the universe is one of the strongest forces in the human family. And so the sociology professor said, I beg your pardon. And when he said, I beg your pardon, the clippers would cut off themselves and everybody stopped. And he said, what do you mean? He said that when the European white man came to this country, some of the first things they did was build some of the top universities in the New England area to educate himself. He said when he got the oranges in Florida, the sugar cane in Louisiana, the oil in Texas, the grapes in California, the Balk in Virginia, the cotton in Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, there'd be a Wall Street to control the capital, and there'd be a West Point to defend it. He said that is the United States. So Reverend King said, have a good day, sir. That was one of the most unique debates. He said that they get the natural order and the social order. He said the first white woman that got a chance to get an education in the United States in 1848. First chance a white woman got a chance to vote was in 1920. He said, who was responsible for that? He said, it wasn't a black man, it wasn't a black woman, it wasn't a white woman. He said that was white man's system he had set up, and he kept control of it. And so Dr. Lawrence Reddick, the political science teacher at Alabama State, said, if the American Constitution is going to be an old document, and said, unless there be some changes, that we're going to have some problems. And we found out now that the few senators can block the whole country from making the move and follow. So anyway, that's another story. So anyway, you got another question?
Yeah.